In the eternal shadows of the Nile's forgotten tombs where the gods whisper promises of immortality, one concubine's forbidden gaze upon the Pharaoh's hidden rites unveiled a horror that bound the living eternally to the dead, ensuring no soul ever truly escaped the grasp of the Underworld. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the golden sands of Thebes, where the great palace of Pharaoh Amenhotep III stood like a sentinel against the encroaching night. Aset, a young woman of 19 summers, born in the fertile delta villages far to the north, felt the weight of destiny press upon her as the royal barge carried her upstream. She had been chosen not for her beauty alone, though her dark eyes and lithe form had turned heads in her humble home, but for a whisper of prophecy from the temple oracles. The gods favor her, they had said, their voices echoing like distant thunder. Yet as the palace loomed, its colossal pylons etched with hieroglyphs of divine power, a chill unrelated to the cooling air settled in her bones. Aset's mind raced with conflicting emotions. Ambition burned within her. She had dreamed of escaping the drudgery of village life, of wielding influence in the pharaoh's court. But fear gnawed at the edges of that dream, rumors of the harem shadows, where women vanished into silence, their names erased from the scrolls of the living. Her mother had warned her, in hushed tones by the hearth, of the Jeneret House, the secluded wing where the pharaoh's wives and concubines dwelt. It is a cage of gold, she had said, where the Nile's secrets drown the unwary. Upon rival, Aset was led through labyrinthine corridors by silent attendants, their faces masked in linen veils that muffled even their breaths. The air grew thick with incense, myrrh, and lotus, glowing and heavy, as if masking some deeper decay. Torches flickered on walls adorned with scenes of Osiris's resurrection, his body pieced together by Isis's magic, but the paintings seemed to shift in the dim light, the god's eyes following her with accusatory stares. She was bathed in scented waters, her skin anointed with oils that left a lingering numbness, dressed in sheer linen that whispered against her flesh like spectral fingers. In the heart of the Jeneret House, she met the others, the great royal wife. Nefertiti's shadow lingered in tales, but here were lesser consorts, Meret, with her sharp gaze and whispered alliances. Kiya, pale and withdrawn, her eyes hollow as if she had glimpsed the Duat too soon. They circled Aset like vultures, their smiles polite but laced with venom. The pharaoh seeks vitality. Meret murmured, her voice a silken thread, but vitality comes at a cost. Aset felt isolation creep in, the vast palace shrinking round her, the distant Nile's murmur sounding like muffled cries. That night, as Aset lay on her reed mat, the palace seemed alive with unseen presences. Soft footsteps echoed in empty halls, and a low chant drifted from hidden chambers, words in the ancient tongue, invoking Anubis and the weighing of hearts. Sleep evaded her, replaced by visions of shadowed figures performing rites under the moon, their hands stained not with blood, but with an ethereal glow that promised eternal bondage. When dawn broke, his servant delivered a scroll, an invitation to the pharaoh's private audience. Excitement warred with dread in her chest. This was her ascent. Yet the air tasted of impending doom. As she approached the throne room, the god's eyes avoided hers, and a faint, acrid scent like preserved flesh wafted from behind sealed doors. The pharaoh, Amenhotep, sat enthroned, his form godlike yet weary, as if the weight of eternity pressed upon him. "You shall join the eternal circle," he intoned, his voice resonating like a tomb's echo. Aset's heart pounded. What circle? But before she could question, the room grew colder, and in the corner of her eye, a concubine she hadn't noticed before stood motionless, her skin unnaturally pale, as if she were already among the dead. The audience ended abruptly, leaving Aset with a token, a small amulet of obsidian, cool to the touch. pulsing faintly like a trapped heartbeat. That night, alone, she clutched it, feeling its chill seep into her veins, whispering of rituals yet to come, and the inescapable fate that bound all who served the pharaoh to shadows beyond death. The days in the Jeneret House blurred into a tapestry of opulence and unease, where the sun's golden rays pierced the latticed windows like accusing fingers. Aset navigated the intricate web of alliances among the concubines, her ambition fueling whispered conversations in shaded gardens. Meret, the eldest, took her under wing, or so it seemed, sharing tales of the pharaoh's favor. He seeks not just pleasure. Meret confided one afternoon amid blooming lotuses, their petals unfurling like secrets, but souls to anchor his core in the afterlife. Aset laughed it off. But the words lingered, heavy as the humid air that carried the scent of river mud and decay from the nearby necropolis. Internally, Aset wrestled with doubt. Her village upbringing had instilled reverence for the gods. But here, in the palace's gilded isolation, faith twisted into fear. She missed the simple rhythms of home, the Nile's predictable floods, the warmth of familial bonds. Now, surrounded by women whose eyes held hidden resentments, she felt adrift, her sense of self eroding like sandstone under relentless winds. Kiya, the quiet one, avoided her but once. In a moment of vulnerability, murmured, "The rituals begin at the new moon. Beware the binding." Aset pressed for more, but Kiya retreated, her footsteps fading into the echoing corridors like a ghost's retreat. The palace's atmosphere deepened the dread. At night, the walls seemed to breathe, releasing faint sighs that mimicked the wind through papyrus reeds. Aset would lie awake, the amulet round her neck growing colder, its pulse sensing with her heartbeat. Sensory details assaulted her. The metallic tang of incense burners, the silky chill of linen sheets that clung like shrouds, the distant howls of jackals echoing from the desert, invoking Anubis's watchful gaze. One evening, during a communal meal, a concubine named Kiya collapsed, her body rigid, eyes wide with unspoken terror. The others exchanged knowing glances, but no one spoke. "The gods claim their due," Meret said flatly, as Kiya's form was carried away into the shadows. Aset's confrontation came during her first private audience with the pharaoh. The chamber was dim, lit by flickering oil lamps that cast elongated shadows resembling elongated mummies. Amenhotep's presence was overwhelming, his skin scented with myrrh, his eyes holding the depth of the Duat. He spoke of eternity, of rituals passed from pharaoh to pharaoh, where concubines offered their essence to ensure the king's rebirth. "You will be my anchor," he whispered, his hand brushing hers, sending a jolt of icy premonition through her. Aset's mind screamed in conflict, the allure of power, the horror of surrender. She nodded, feigning devotion, but inside, fear coiled like a serpent. As the middle of her initiation intensified, Aset witnessed a veiled ceremony in the palace's hidden courtyard. Under the starless sky, concubines formed a circle, chanting invocations to Osiris. The air grew thick, charged with an unnatural stillness, as if the world held its breath. A faint glow emanated from a central altar, where a figure, perhaps Kiya, lay motionless, her form wrapped in linen that seemed to writhe subtly. Aset's heart raced. Was this death, or something worse? The pharaoh appeared, intoning words that twisted the air, promising immortality through binding. Sensory overload gripped her, the acrid smoke stinging her eyes, the chant's vibration in her chest, the taste of bile rising in dread. The part culminated in a chilling revelation. Returning to her quarters, Aset found her amulet glowing faintly, and upon touching it, visions flooded her concubines from ages past, their souls trapped in eternal service. Whispering pleas for release, Kiya appeared at her door, her face gaunt. "The ritual binds you forever. Escape is illusion." Aset recoiled, the isolation complete. Her tragic path unfolding as the palace's shadows seemed to close in, promising no dawn would free her from the encroaching doom. As the new moon approached, the Jeneret House transformed into a realm of hushed anticipation and mounting dread. Aset's days were filled with preparatory rites, baths in Nile water infused with herbs that left her skin tingling with a natural sensitivity. Meditations before altars where Osiris's statue loomed, its eyes carved from lapis lazuli reflecting her growing unease. Ambition still flickered within her, a desperate hope that favor would elevate her beyond the harem's confines, but fear dominated now. Manifesting in restless nights where dreams blurred with reality, she saw herself as a bird, trapped in a golden net, wings clipped by invisible threads. Meret's guidance turned sinister. The binding ensures the pharaoh's corridors, she explained during a secluded walk along the palace gardens, where palms rustled like conspiratorial whispers. Our essence becomes his bridge to the afterlife. Aset probed deeper, her voice trembling. But Meret only smiled enigmatically, her eyes holding the void of someone who had glimpsed too much. The air carried a persistent chill, despite the midday heat, as if the Duat's breath seeped through cracks in the stone. Sensory details heightened the tension, the gritty sand underfoot, the faint metallic echo of distant hammers forging ritual tools. The oppressive silence broken only by occasional, inexplicable sobs from hidden chambers. Isolation deepened Aset's internal conflict. She confided in no one, her thoughts a whirlwind of regret and defiance. Why had she accepted the summons? Was power worth this creeping horror? Kiya's warnings echoed, but when Aset sought her out, she found the concubines' quarters empty. A single scarab amulet left on the floor, its surface etched with symbols of eternal watchfulness. The palace felt alive with malice, walls pressing in, corridors twisting into mazes that led back to shadowed alcoves where figures lurked just beyond sight. The middle escalated during a nocturnal gathering, led blindfolded through underground passages. Aset felt the cool, damp stone against her palms, the air thick with earth and decay like entering a tomb while still breathing. Removed, the blindfold revealed a chamber lit by braziers, concubines ranged in a spiral, their faces pale masks. The pharaoh entered, cloaked in leopard skin, chanting invocations that vibrated through her bones. "We bind the living to the eternal," he proclaimed, and one by one, the women extended their arms, a faint glow tracing veins like luminous rivers. Aset's turn came. As he touched her forehead, a surge of cold invaded her, visions of past rites flashing, concubines fading into spectral forms, their screams silent echoes. Psychological tension built as Aset felt her essence fray, the ritual's middle confronted her with a mirror of polished obsidian, where her reflection wavered, merging with phases of the dead. Dread isolation peaked. She was alone in a crowd, bound by invisible chains. The chant intensified, the room spinning with incense-induced vertigo, sounds distorting into whispers of lost souls. The part ended on a chilling note. As the rite concluded, Aset stumbled back to her chamber, collapsing before her amulet. It pulsed stronger now, and in its reflection, she saw not her face, but tears eyes pleading, mouth forming words. "You are next." The door creaked shut on its own, sealing her in darkness. The tragic inevitability clear. Her soul was already entwined. The ritual's grasp tightening toward an eternal, doomed servitude, with the bindings after-effects lingering like a fevered dream. Aset's world narrowed to the Jeneret House's oppressive embrace. Mornings brought false normalcy, attendants serving honeyed dates and milk, their eyes downcast, avoiding her gaze as if she were mocked, but ambition clashed with horror. She craved the pharaoh's attention, yet each summons filled her with dread. Internal conflicts raged. Was she a fool for seeking power in this gilded prison, or a survivor clinging to illusion? The palace's isolation amplified her turmoil. The Nile's distant roar mocking her entrapment. Meret revealed more fragments of the dark truth. The rituals date to the Old Kingdom, she whispered in a lotus-scented bathhouse. Steam curling like spirits. Pharaohs buried retainers alive to serve in death. Now, we offer our call willingly, or so they claim. Aset's skin prickled. The water felt viscous, clinging like unseen hands. Sensory immersion deepened their knees, the echo of dripping water like heartbeats. The faint rot beneath floral perfumes. Shadows dancing on walls as torches sputtered. Kiya's disappearance haunted her. Searching empty quarters, Aset found hidden scrolls faded hieroglyphs depicting concubines in afterlife processions, their forms translucent, bound to the pharaoh's throne in the Duat. Fear escalated. Was Kiya now among them? The palace seemed to conspire. Doors opening to wrong pots, whispers naming the lost. The middle intensified in a midnight rite. Gathered in a subterranean temple, the air cold and stale, tasting of dust and eternity, the concubines formed a circle round an effigy of Osiris. The pharaoh invoked the gods, his voice booming like thunder in a tomb as incense burned. Visions assailed Aset echoes of past victims, their souls trapped in eternal vigilance. Eyes vacant yet aware, she felt a pull, her essence draining toward the effigy. Confrontation with her doom, resist and face oblivion, submit and lose herself forever. Psychological dread peaked as the rite climaxed. A concubine stepped forward, volunteering her gift, her body slumping as a glow transferred to the pharaoh. Aset's heart hammered, the room spun with disorienting chants, isolation complete in the crowd's fervor, the ending chilled, returning. Aset heard Kiya's voice in the wind, "Join us," and saw her shadow on the wall. Merging with her own, the amulet burned cold against her skin. Sealing her tragic path, the ritual's web tightened, promising no escape from the afterlife's hungry embrace. The palace's rhythm grew erratic, mirroring Aset's fracturing psyche. Days blurred with enforced seclusion, attendants enforcing purification through fasts that left her weak. Her ambition flickering like a dying flame, internal strife deepened. She yearned for freedom. Yet the pharaoh's gaze promised godlike status, fear dominated. Visions of bound souls hunting her waking hours. The Jeneret House felt like a living entity, its walls pulsing with ancient malice. Meret, now a reluctant confidant, shared a forbidden tale in Akhenaten's time. Concubines vanished during solar eclipses. Their core harvested for the Aten's light. They spoke in a garden at dusk, the sky bleeding red. Crickets chirping like accusatory whispers. Sensory details amplified horror. The cooling sand shifting underfoot. The bitter taste of unspoken truths. Faint moans carried on the breeze from the necropolis, discovering a hidden alcove. Aset found relics amulets like hers, inscribed with pleas for release. Isolation crushed her. The other concubines avoided her, their eyes holding pity or envy. The middle confronted her in a personal rite. Summoned to the pharaoh's inner sanctum, the room dim with flickering lamps casting grotesque shadows, he revealed the anchor ritual. "Your essence will bridge my life to eternity." Touching her, a cold surge invaded. Visions of the Duat endless halls where concubines wandered, eternally serving. Dread built, she felt her soul fraying. Confrontation with inevitability. The chant rose, the air thickening, sounds distorting into spectral calls. Aset resisted inwardly, but the pull intensified. Chilling close, as she fled, the palace corridors elongated, leading back to the sanctum. A reflection in a pool showed faded features, the tragic doom evident. She was becoming a shadow, bound forever to the pharaoh's dark eternity. Nights in the Jeneret House stretched into eternal vigils, where sleep became a fractured torment for Aset, her mind ensnared in dreams that blurred the veil between the living world and the Duat. In these visions, she wandered endless obsidian halls, chains of ethereal light coiling round her limbs like living serpents, binding her to faceless foes whose hollow eyes demanded unending devotion. The image haunted her upon waking, her own form splintered into shards of light, each piece screaming silently as it was pulled into the void. A visual echo of her soul's impending dissolution. Ambition, once a blazing fire that had propelled her from humble village origins to the palace's gilded heights, now withered into a mere survival instinct, clashing fiercely with a growing resignation that whispered insidious temptations perhaps. Submission was mercy, a quiet surrender to the gods' unyielding design. Yet this internal conflict raged like a storm within her, the defiant spark of her youth, yearning to shatter the chains of fate, battled against the crushing weight of inevitability. Leaving her psyche raw and divided, she knew, deep in her bones, that her tragic destiny was sealed not by choice, but by the ancient currents of prophecy and power that had swept her here, ensuring no mortal will could divert the river of doom. The palace's isolation enveloped her completely, transforming the once vibrant corridors into a labyrinth of solitude where attendants moved like ghosts from forgotten tombs, their touches as cold and impersonal as weathered stone sarcophagi. Aset felt the walls pressing in, the air stagnant with the unspoken grief of generations. Amplifying her psychological turmoil, moments of frantic hope gave way to paralyzing despair, her mind a mirror cracking under the strain of her inescapable end. Sensory details deepened the dread, the faint creak of settling stones mimicking distant sighs, the chill drafts carrying whispers that might have been wind, all the laments of the bound. The metallic aftertaste of fear lingering on her tongue, like a poison slowly taking hold. Kiya's fate unveiled itself through Meret's reluctant confession, a revelation that etched itself into Aset's memory as a chilling tableau under the moonlit courtyard. They met there in secrecy, the silver glow casting elongated shadows that danced like accusatory spirits across the flagstones, the air heavy with jasmine blossoms masking an underlying rot of decay from the nearby garden's nature as facade crumbling to reveal death as truth. Meret, her face a mask of worried defeat, leaned close, her breath warm against Aset as he yet carrying the chill of revelation. She refused the binding, and now her car roams unrested, her fractured essence wandering the edges of the Duat, forever denied peace. The image burned indelibly, Kiya's spectral form translucent and tormented drifting through twilight. The realms her eyes wide with eternal regret, a haunting imprint that fueled Aset's internal storm ambitions. Remnants urged rebellion like Kiya's, but Hora warned of the same fractured doom, her tragic path mirroring the lost concubines. In cruel symmetry, driven by a desperate need to understand, Aset ventured into the Forbidden Tombs adjacent to the palace, slipping through shadowed gates under cover of night, her heart pounding with a mix of defiance and terror. The descent was a sensory assault that clawed at her senses, the dank air choking her lungs like the breath of the undead, dust coating her tongue with the gritty residue of centuries. Faint phosphorescent glows emanating from the walls where murals depicted eternal servitude, concubines frozen in painted agony, their forms splintered into serving wraiths, eyes pleading across time. As she delved deeper, echoes rose, whispers of past concubines forming a chorus of despair, their voices layering into a symphony of sorrow that resonated in her chest, each word a shard embedding in her psyche, bound, fractured, eternal, the scene seared, itself as a haunting visual, ghostly silhouettes materializing in the gloom, their essences crumbling like ancient papyrus, pulling at Aset's own soul in a premonition of her fate, intensifying her conflicts, the pull toward escape clashing with the inexorable drag of destiny. The middle of her ordeal escalated in a collective ritual within the great hall where the concubines linked hands in a circle of forced unity, the pharaoh at the center channeling there essences like a vortex drawing in the stars. The room thrummed with incantations, the air growing viscous and cold as Aset felt her life force ebb away in agonizing pulses, visions assaulting her of fractured souls confronting her directly. Pieces of herself scattering into the void like shattered pottery, each fragment bearing her face. Twisted in perpetual anguish, a memorable imprint of disintegration that mirrored her psychological depth, the ambition that had defined her now splintering under horrorous weight. Tension peaked with a piercing scream from a fellow concubine, her form dimming before their eyes. As she became the anchor, her body slumping while a luminous haze transferred to the pharaoh, leaving behind a husk that stared vacantly into nothingness, an image that haunted like a frozen nightmare. Aset's dread and isolation climaxed in that moment. She knew she was next. Her internal conflicts resolving into a tragic acceptance of the unbreakable cycle. The ending delivered its impact in solitude as Aset returned to her chamber, collapsing before her amulet, which suddenly shattered with a crystalline crack that echoed like breaking bones. Releasing a whisper that slithered into her ears, "You cannot break what is already bound." The fragments glowed faintly on the floor, forming a fractured mosaic of her face, sealing her tragic fate. The horror of eternal fragmentation loomed, an inescapable shadow that would consume her whole. As the full moon ascended like a pale eye in the velvet sky over Thebes, the rituals in the Jeneret House surged to a feverish crescendo, transforming the palace into a vessel of ancient dread. Aset's mind had become a desolate battlefield, where the last embers of her once fierce ambition clashed violently against the tidal wave of overwhelming horror that threatened to engulf her entirely. She paced her chamber restlessly, the cool marble floor beneath her bare feet sending shivers up her spine, as if the stone itself were alive with the chill of the underworld. Every shadow cast by the flickering oil lamps seemed to stretch toward her, whispering of her doomed path, a path etched in the very architecture of the palace, where hieroglyphs on the walls depicted souls eternally yoked to divine will. The air hummed with unspoken finality, thick and electric, carrying the distant chants from hidden alcoves like a current that pulled at her resolve. Internally, Aset wrestled with a storm of conflicts. The girl from the Delta who had dreamed of queenship now recoiled from the monster the dream had birthed, yet a stubborn spark of defiance urged her to cling to power even as it slipped through her fingers like Nile silt. This was her tragic inevitability, chosen by oracles, bound by rites, destined to fade into the pharaoh's eternal shadow, with no escape from the god's cruel design. In the dim hours before midnight, Meret appeared at her door like a spectre from a half-forgotten nightmare, her face gaunt and etched with the lines of someone who had surrendered long ago. The elder concubine, once a figure of calculated poise, now seemed broken, her voice a fragile thread as she led Aset to a hidden chamber deep within the palace's underbelly. The passage there was narrow and suffocating, the walls closing in with the scent of aged papyrus and dust, mingled with the metallic tang of fierce sweat that clung to the air like an omen. Torchlight danced erratically on the stone, revealing faded pleas scratched into the walls by desperate hands, names of women long gone. Their final words a haunting mosaic of despair. "Release me from the bridge." Meret paused, her hand trembling as she touched one inscription and revealed the core of the horror in a whisper that seared into Aset's memory like a brand. "We become the bridge," she said, her eyes hollow pools reflecting endless voids. "Our souls form the pharaoh's path through death, anchoring his car to the living world while we linger in twilight, neither alive nor truly departed." The image burned in Aset's mind, a spectral archway of writhing forms, concubines twisted into an eternal structure, their faces frozen in silent agony as the pharaoh's spirit trod upon them. Aset's heart pounded in rebellion. Ambition screamed that she could bend this fate, but horror whispered that resistance only tightened the noose, her internal conflict manifesting as a nauseous churning. Her gut, the inescapable tragedy of her role crystallizing in that dim chamber like a cursed aching. Aset's isolation reached its pinnacle in the solitude that followed, the palace's vast silence becoming a deafening void that amplified the echoes of lost voices within her head. She retreated to her quarters, but the space felt alien now. The linen curtains billowing like shrouds in a breeze that carried no warmth, only the faint, acrid whisper of incense from distant rites. Sensory details assaulted her, the cool draft slithering across her skin like invisible fingers tracing her doom, the distant lap of the Nile sounding like muffled sobs of the drowned. The taste of salt on her lips from tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. Alone, she confronted the depth of her psyche. Ambition's remnants clawed at her, urging one last bid for a freedom, perhaps a plea to the pharaoh or a desperate flight into the desert night. Yet horror prevailed, rooting her in place, the tragic fate unfolding as an inexorable tide. She was no longer Aset the dreamer, but a vessel marked for sacrifice, her conflicts resolving into a hollow resignation that echoed the empty halls. The middle of the night brought the ultimate confrontation, drawing Aset to the throne room where the final rite awaited like a yawning abyss. The chamber was a cavern of shadows, illuminated only by braziers that cast a ruddy glow on the golden throne, making it resemble a funeral pyre. The pharaoh sat enthroned, his form godlike yet diminished, eyes burning with the fanaticism of one who had glimpsed eternity and craved its embrace. Concubines encircled the room, their faces pale masks of submission, but Aset felt the weight of their collective dread pressing upon her like an invisible shroud. Surrender fully, the pharaoh demanded, his voice resonating through the stone like a judgment from the gods, extending a hand adorned with rings that glinted like stars in the Duat. As the chants swelled a low, rhythmic invocation to Osiris and Anubis, the air grew frigid, a cold invading Aset's core that spread like frost through her veins, numbing her limbs and sharpening her terror. Visions assaulted her, glimpses of the afterlife, endless corridors where she served ceaselessly, her form a translucent wisp pouring tea for the pharaoh's shade. Her eyes forever hollow with unfulfilled longing, the image etched itself indelibly, a chain of souls forming a luminous bridge across a chasm of darkness. Each link a concubine's face twisted in perpetual torment, their silent screams vibrating through the ether. Dread built to a breaking point, Aset's mind fractured under the strain, ambition's final spark extinguished as she felt her essence begin to bridge the worlds. A confrontation with oblivion that left her gasping, the psychological tension coiling tighter than a serpent's embrace. In that intensifying maelstrom, Aset's internal conflicts reached their zenith. Defiance flared one last time, a desperate mental cry against the gods' injustice. But horror drowned it, the tragic inevitability crushing over her like a wave from the primordial chaos. The chants peaked, the room spinning in a vortex of sound and shadow. The sensory overload complete, the metallic clash of ritual symbols echoing like breaking bones. The icy grip of the pharaoh's touch searing her soul, the vision solidifying into a haunting tableau of eternal servitude. The rites' chilling resolution came as the moon crested its zenith, the chants fading into an oppressive silence that rang in Aset's ears like the toll of judgment. She staggered back. But in a disorienting shift, she saw her own body from afar slumped against the throne. Eyes vacant, yet her consciousness hovered, detached yet inescapably tethered by threads of ethereal light. The tragic inevitability struck her like a dagger to the heart. She was now the eternal servant, her soul woven into the pharaoh's bridge, forever lost in the liminal space between life and death. The image lingered, haunting a solitary figure adrift in twilight, reaching for a freedom that dissolved like mist, her cries swallowed by the void. The palace's shadows closing into the eternal guardians of her doomed fate. In the rite's aftermath, Aset existed in a harrowing limbo, her physical form lingering in the Jeneret House like a hollow vessel, while her spirit drifted aimlessly along the fringes of the Duat. Caught in a twilight realm where the living and dead brushed against each other like fleeting shadows, the once vibrant palace, with its opulent halls of polished alabaster and gold-leafed columns, had transformed into an eternal prison, its grandeur mocking her entrapment. The shadows lengthening into loyal companions that slithered along the walls, whispering reminders of her folly. Sensory remnants clung to her, the fading incense curling like dying breaths in the stale air, carrying the bitter residue of myrrh that now tasted of ashes on her tongue. An eternal chill seeping from the stones, wrapping round her like the embrace of a mummified lover, numbing her flesh while igniting a deeper, unquenchable ache in her soul. Internally, Aset's conflicts resolved into a hollow acceptance, the storm of her psyche finally subsiding into a desolate calm ambition's remnants. Those fiery dreams of queenship and influence that had lured her from the Delta's simple shores now crumbled under the weight of realization. The price of such power was eternal bondage, a tragic fate woven into her very essence by the gods in different threads. Yet even in surrender, flickers of rebellion stirred, faint echoes of defiance clashing against resignation, her mind a fractured mosaic where hope's shards cut against the inevitability of doom. Ensuring her psychological depth remained a tormenting labyrinth. Forever unresolved, Meret appeared one last time, a spectral figure in the dim corridor, her form gaunt and translucent as if she teetered on the edge of dissolution, her eyes holding the vacant stare of one who had crossed thresholds unseen. They stood in a forgotten alcove, the air thick with finality, dust motes dancing in the weak torchlight like souls in futile escape. Meret's final words fell like stones into a bottomless well. "We all cross the bridge," she murmured, her voice a rasping echo that reverberated through Aset's bones, etching an indelible image of vast luminous span arching over the abyss constructed from writhing concubine. Forms, their limbs intertwined in perpetual agony, faces contorted in silent pleas as pharaohs trod. Indifferently across their backs, the scene burned into Aset's memory, Meret's hand reaching out, cold as grave linen, before withdrawing into shadow, leaving behind the haunting visual of her feeding silhouette. Merging with the wall's carvings, a testament to the unbreakable cycle that claimed them all. Isolation became eternal, a suffocating veil that draped over Aset's existence, severing her from the world of the living even as she wandered the spectral halls of the palace. The corridors stretched infinitely, echoing with the distant hum of courtly life laughter from banquets, the clink of golden goblets. The murmur of scribes' reeds on papyrus sounds that taunted her from afar. Unreachable as stars to a buried soul, sensory immersion deepened the horror, the cool draught whispering through cracks like the sighs of the forgotten, carrying the faint, metallic tang of blood from ancient altars. The walls' subtle glow under moonlight, revealing faint outlines of hands pressing from within, as if predecessors clawed for release. Aset's psyche unraveled further in this void, internal conflicts manifesting as visions of her former self, a village girl dancing by the Nile, now superimposed over her current form. The two clashing in a tragic dance of what was and what must be. Her doomed fate a relentless current dragging her deeper into fragmentation. The climax unfolded in a vision that gripped her like a vice, pulling her consciousness into the pharaoh's final moments. She saw him on his deathbed, his godlike frame withered. The chamber filled with priests' frantic chants, and the acrid smoke of purification fires. As his cough faltered, Aset felt the bridge activate within her searing pool that drew his essence through her fractured soul, her form convulsing as if torn asunder. The image haunted eternally, her spirit as a shattered conduit, pieces of light funneling her. Pharaoh's shade across the chasm, his grateful gaze meeting hers and passing indifferent to her eternal sacrifice, while she confronted the endless service awaiting serving in the Duat's halls, pouring nectar for his feasts. Her autonomy dissolved into perpetual motion. Dread and isolation peaked. She was alone in the multitude of bound souls, her psychological depth exposed in the raw agony of realization. No rebellion could alter this, only amplify the tragedy. The story's haunting end came as dawn broke, pale light filtering through latticed windows like reluctant mercy. casting long shadows that mimicked chains across the floor. Aset's voice, now ethereal and faint, joined the whispers permeating the palace, a chorus of warnings to future concubines, carried on the wind. Turn back, for the bridge claims all. The final image seared itself, Aset's form dissolving into mist at the window, her eyes reflecting the rising sun yet holding only darkness. An immortal echo bound in horror's unyielding grasp. Her tragic fate complete, the ritual's legacy endured, a cycle of doom echoing through time, ensuring every listener felt the chill of inevitable entrapment. The palace's shadows reaching out as if to pull them in.